Okay, the time is now 6:30. I'd like to call the regular Board of Finance meeting to order.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, roll call. Don Cavello. Here. Gary Salomon.
Here.
David Sars.
Here.
Travis Hines.
Here.
Ed Dumaine is excused absence. Scott Charlton.
Here.
Scott Gardner.
Here.
And Tom Sinkowitz. And Becky Hewitt will be filling in for Doty, who could not make it. Before moving on to the acceptance of the minutes, is there anything that any members would like to add?
I would like to add two things to the agenda. I guess it would be 4D. I'd like to add discussion around the Board of Ed 64,000 ECS shortfall. And what we're going to do with that. And then the 4E for me would be there's some outstanding FOI requests that have not been answered, and I'd like to kind of see where we stand with those.
Okay. So Scott is making a motion there to add those items as he stated. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I have a second. Any discussion? I will just note that because this was a very last minute ad, and of course I did not have time to line up anybody such as the superintendent of schools or the chair of the Board of Ed. I don't know if we're going to have all the answers on that particular item for the ECS. I will state though that my intentions were, because I knew our superintendent could not make it to this meeting, was to add that onto the September agenda. And from what I understood is that the superintendent between now and then was going to speak with the Board of Ed about that subject, because what it was all going to boil down to is what's going to be cut, what is going to be done to reconcile that cut. And I know as of now, I've gotten no updates from him since last month on it, and I had looked into that prior to this meeting, hence why I had not put that on the agenda. So we can add the item, but I have nothing to report on that. And then the other one we can certainly add, and we'll see if there's anything on that. All those in favor of adding those two items signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Next is the acceptance of the minutes from the July 17th, 2019 meeting. Minutes have been distributed. Any questions or corrections?
The motion, the minutes be accepted as presented.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries to accept the minutes, July 17th, 2019 meeting. All right, next item under new business, update on the audit firm. Ron, I know you couldn't make it with us last month at the meeting. One of the big things I wanted to ask if you could start while we're on this subject is to update us before we get into any detail on procurement policy update. Specifically where we stand with an audit company as far as having that committed, how far off are we, what does the timeline look like for that?
They've started already. In terms of the timeline, they're going to be on site in early September, right after Labor Day. We've already started working with them. The Board of Ed is already working with them. We've transferred a few trial balances, and because the Board of Ed's budget is so much more comprehensive and larger, they've already begun work with them. So the audit firm is Markham. They have offices nationwide, and the office that we're particularly working with is out of Providence. It's the closest office to us, but they have staff all throughout the Northeast that will be able to satisfy us in order to make sure we have a timely audit. In terms of definitive schedule, we plan on detailing that in early September in terms of what we can do and what they can do.
All right. So next, under that being I, procurement policy update, I know you sent out
Yeah,
attachment
so
to everybody.
Appendix A of everybody's packet shows the evaluations for the 2 bid submissions to our RFP. Provides a score sheet on the details that we're looking for in each audit firm. There's a comprehensive evaluation. We went through, gave various scores. I'm not sure how familiar everybody is with the service contract audit, but you evaluate more than just the bid price. Service contracts need to evaluate the capability of the firm that we're trying to bring on. And the firm we selected is definitely reputable nationwide, and they're more than capable of handling our town.
Any questions or comments from the members, particularly about the procurement policy update? And the update we just got, of course, on the audit, the name of the audit company and the timeline.
Monday, I think we told him.
It was 2 weeks ago. I don't know the exact date. I can give you the exact date we decided. It might have been last Monday or Monday before, I can't remember. I don't remember one week from the next time.
What's the contract price?
52,000. That's just for the first year. That's a performance-based contract. If we're not happy with them after the first year, we will not extend them for the following 2 years.
Any other questions or comments? No? All right. Next item, B, to review the current fiscal year 2019-2020 budget statement. So that was also included in our attachment.
So, I gotta preface this a little bit. Everything that you see in the text, cover sheet, first, I think it's 4 pages, the information in all of that is 100% accurate. We've recently experienced some IT issues with our accounting systems that have been, it's been printing up reports that just haven't, it's not the traditional way we've printed the reports. There's no explanation for this right now. I've been working with the IT consultant, trying to figure out what the issue is, and it's just one problem after another. We've dug deep into it. If you look at the first appendix B, you'll notice 2 reports. You'll see a revenue report. It'll say, the title should say budgeted revenue statement, and you'll see another report that says budgeted revenue and expense statement. You'll see the difference in those 2 reports. The first report is from last month. So the revenue statement I'm using for this report is the revenue statement that was presented last month, because that's the only report that prints out legibly. It's the only report we can provide that gives some type of picture with accurate numbers. So, and since I wasn't here last month to talk about it, I figured we could just put that in and we could talk about it this month. That's the best thing we could provide right now. As far as the expense report, we're not confident on the numbers that are projecting in there, and that has to do with the way the system is configured from the IT department side. Not our own personal IT department, the IT department that's in connection with accounting. So that statement is not accurate, but the numbers that are in the front of the document, in the text, those do depict accurate accurate expense statements. Just to be clear, I don't want to have any discrepancy on that. So if you look at the expense, just to highlight what I'm talking about, if you go to section 3 of our FY19 expenditures, you can see that what we're calculating right now is a downward trend in overall expenditures. So in FY16, we expense 96% of our budget. So far, what we're calculating for FY19, it's about 8-point deduction, 8-point drop in overall expenditures. Now, that number is subject to change upon what the audit finds and what they tell us to adjust in terms of our account booking, but the trend analysis showed a tighter fiscal management on the city's funds, which is a good thing. Even if it were to stay below 94 or 90%, right around the 90%, that's still trending downward. And then, again, all those numbers will be finalized upon completion of the audit.
One thing I'm just curious about, Ron, if there's any discussion about this is, I know last year we talked about after the audit results and the difference of, I think, like 260,000, that discrepancy that had to get corrected. The Board of Education had a corrective action plan which was presented. My question is, are we looking to get closer to more alignment with school business department as far as our accounting? Because I know that was supposed to be part of the deal. I'm just curious as to.
Yes, I'm glad you asked that. So the system that we're using right now is called accounting. It's not, we've had this system for as long as we've had computers in the town, which gives you an idea of how long this particular system has been in use. It's time for an upgrade. There needs to be a more efficient mechanism to create some type of budgetary analysis that gives a bit more transparency than what we've had over the years. Now, I understand what we've had in the past, everyone's comfortable with, you're familiar with it, but there's a better way to do things in terms of projecting what we're actually spending our money on. And if you look at Appendix C, and I don't want to jump ahead or anything, but if you look at Appendix C, it's my attempt at trying to provide that type of analysis. I have a template that provides a month-to-month snapshot of what our monthly expenditures are. So what I mean by that is that this particular report shows July expenditures from FY19, and we'll compare that to July expenditures for FY20. That gives us an idea of what we're spending at certain times of the year, and if there are any anomalies that we can address. Maybe in FY19 we spent a little more than we would have, which would explain why we have less money spent in FY20. And I'll give you an example of what I'm trying to say. If you look at the template, now the template analysis sheet, which is right after the beginning of Appendix C. Let me get there myself. The template is titled template, and if you look at the finance department, you'll notice a difference in expenditures from July FY19 to July FY20 of $7,200. And you ask why, the normal question would be, why did we spend $7,000 less this year than the previous year? It's because we don't have an audit firm yet. We expensed $6,900 last year in July that we didn't this year. Those types of questions can be answered throughout the budget with the right analysis, with the right level of efficiency, and presenting it in a way that gives a bit more transparency to everybody. And that's the goal going forward. We're just going to build on this. Next month, it should be a bit more refined, and going forward, we can refine it to a point where we're more comfortable. And I welcome any suggestions from the Board of Finance and any particulars that you would like to see. I'll do whatever I can to make those modifications so we can provide an accurate snapshot. And to go back to what you asked, are we going to be more in line with the Board of Education? So we're experiencing our difficulties with accounting right now. Currently, the Board of Education is in the process of transitioning to a different accounting software as well. They're soliciting a procurement. They sent out an RFP with a collection of other school systems to get the best price possible for an accounting system. We think it's the best thing for the town to have as many people in the town proficient in one accounting system, which would give us a bit more expertise in times of need like we're in right now. So we're looking to see what they choose for an accounting system, and we will most likely try to join them. It's hard to say if we'll definitely do it, we have to see what may come, but the goal is to be in conjunction in terms of operating systems for accounting with the Board of Education.
Yeah, another thing we can look into, and I think either Scott or Gary, somebody had brought this up before, was having perhaps periodic updates from the board as far as where they stand with certain parts of the budget. I mean, we've talked about it, we brought up the suggestion, but of course we're still not there yet. So that's something that I think should be discussed again, particularly with Ron and Ken.
That's fine by me.
Yeah, as opposed to, we tend to get more into the nitty gritty with that, obviously during budget season, but the reality is it's not something that needs to wait till budget season. We can get periodic updates as long as we're in line,
Absolutely.
seeing where they stand with their budget.
I'm in communication with Ron Lucier all the time in terms of our accounting operations, but if you want more of a snapshot that provides, I'll see what I can do.
So are you saying this number on your appendix A, that the 9,173,483 is actually accurate? And does it not reflect on the statement for this year so far?
I'm not exactly sure which $9 million number you're talking about. So you're talking about the figure on page 2?
Yeah.
Yes, that number is accurate. That I was able to extract prior to our technical control.
But it's not reflected in here though. Because I'm just trying to figure out, all right, so that's basically a $1.1 million difference.
Correct.
Are these numbers?
When you say
accurate?
I just want to be clear. I want to know which $1.1 million you're talking about.
The budget versus the expenses. So you go back to your block, so you got your budget was 10.3 million, your expenditures are 9.2.
Yep.
So we got a $1.1 million difference.
Yeah, that's the 12% underspent you're talking about?
Right, so are you telling me though I can't figure that out from these numbers right now?
Unfortunately, I can't provide those numbers. As soon as I can, I will definitely give them to you.
Yeah, because I'm just curious
Where
how we
I
underspent that much.
totally
You
understand.
know what I mean? I mean, is it really, is the health insurance really $376,000 short? And if that's the case, how the heck did we end up spending $376,000 less on health?
Again,
Yeah, no, I know, that's why I'm asking about this.
if you
I have to do this at work all day long, so I know.
totally understand, and if you were Becky this week, or in last week and the week before, you've seen me try and plow through
Yeah.
figuring out how to get this. The one thing I will say though, to answer your question is that the numbers are never definite until the audit firm comes in and signs off on everything. So there's, I would like to say that we're gonna be in this ballpark, but again, earlier I stated it could be 96%. We could have a larger bounce, but right now, this is what we're trending. We're trying to give you what we have,
Right.
and going forward, it's going to change. But how much that will change, I can't really say.
When does the audit finish?
But the state says that we have to be complete by the end of the calendar year. You're allowed to file extensions 1 month at a time for 2 months max. There are municipalities that file their audit at the end of the fiscal year, which is completely unacceptable. Historically, we filed on time, which is what I expect us to do. We're going to try and get it done as quickly as possible. My goal is to have it done by the end of the calendar year. If we have it sooner, great, but we're going to be in compliance with state regulations and have it done by the end of the calendar year.
Yeah, the only problem with that, I know has been mentioned, is that that doesn't quite get us close to the third Monday in November. Right, as a charter. So we're still going to be in that scenario where, with the audit being a majority of the report and not being ready by that third Monday, we could still have that meeting. So the annual meeting as the charter dictates, but my guess, is it's kind of not going to be ready by that point. But with the goal, as Ron said, it needs to be ready before end of year, calendar year.
I know traditionally that the audit's been completed in November. I think we are, I think with the exception of the Board of Ed last year. But, we're getting somewhat of a late start, and I'd rather hedge and not say we're gonna have it done by November than, and overpromise something that I'm not completely certain we can deliver. The size of the municipality has a factor in how quickly the audit can get completed, but we're generally a smaller municipality in comparison to some others, but there are too many unknown variables to consider in trying to make sure we meet the firm deadline of November, let alone December.
Right, because I remember the scenario we were in before earlier this year is because we couldn't get that review of the audit done before the end of the year, so we ended up having a special meeting in early January to do that. So I realize we might be doing that again, but pretty much once we get around that time frame between that third Monday in November and of course December 31st, I'm going to be asking for updates on pretty much for a weekly basis as far as where we stand with the audit.
That's exactly what I would expect. I think the putting together the audit can sometimes be more stressful than putting together the budget. They're one and the same essentially, but it's just a matter of organization, procedure, and what you're used to.
Is it spelled out in the contract, the timeframe that the audit has to be done?
Well, they know that every audit they do has to be completed by the end of December. And part of the procurement process was evaluating how often they've met that deadline. If they haven't, what conditions have been, what reasons were given for those exceptions. Traditionally, this firm has been able to meet most audit deadlines that they've had. And I think with the exception of one or two in Rhode Island, but those were anomalies. And there's nothing stating that they have to complete it by a certain time, but they know that it's a state requirement to have it done by the end of December. So that it's kind of, it's not necessarily something you have to ask, but it's something, creating a scheduled timeline in how they're going to go through their audit process is something that they provided, and it's basically a four-step process in terms of what they want to take at 1 month, 2 months, 3 weeks at a time.
And we have to do our due diligence and get the information up front, or else they can't complete it on time.
Oh,
that's the.
We have our information out to our actuaries to provide the accurate information that's needed. We have an actuary, Hooker and Holcomb. And once that information is completed and analyzed by the actuary, we can then send it over to the auditor so they can perform their audit.
Kathy, I know this is a topic we've talked about before, so pool operation budgeted for $103,000, actual $109,253, 6 cents, obviously zero available. Do we have any updates on that as far as what we're?
The only thing I can tell you, Tom, is that the rec department is still working hard to add more classes. Our pool director actually has been out for a couple of months, so that's kind of limited us a little bit. And I think I had shared with you before that I have reached out to the YMCA in Putnam to see if they were able to offer us any assistance or any ideas, anything that we can do to increase revenue for our pool. So.
Okay. Any other items of discussion or questions on the budget statement? No? Okay. Moving on to item C, update of Finance Director Review Committee. So, for those of you who might not have made it to the Selectmen's meeting, a review committee was formed and officially voted on and appointed by the Board of Selectmen. I was put on there as a member of the Board of Finance, and I will, of course, be asking questions from anyone on behalf of the Board of Finance, but also if there's anyone in the general public who has specifics that they would like to be asked of our candidates, meaning certain topics that they would like, please feel free to contact me. If you don't have my contact information already, you can send me questions via email, and I got out to most Board of Finance members here, again, with the same idea of if there's any that, even though we're not all on there, certainly put your questions to me, and I will make a list of questions, so when we're reviewing the resumes and the candidates, I can make sure all our questions are asked so that we are more comfortable with making sure that we have qualified candidates being reviewed for this position of Finance Director. The other thing I want to ask is of the Board of Finance members, did everybody get a copy of the description, Finance Director position? Okay. I do have some extra copies in case anybody didn't get. Okay. So that's the actual job description that we're going by. And Kathy, what's the closing on that position?
So right now, the closing, we would like to have it for August 31st. You had to, when you go on the GFOA site, you had to put a closing date, but in our ad, it was left open until we find the right candidate.
So I just wanted to mention that. Are there any questions or comments from the Board of Finance members on the review committee? No? Okay. Moving on to added items. First, item D. Scott, if you could just, because I know you had worded them and you had sent an email, but I got it right late. So please word the exact item as you presented it.
Well, like I said, I just want to discuss the $64,000 shortfall in the ECS funding and what we're going to do about it. I have answers because it's over from the BOE. I really not looking for answers.
Yeah, unless Mr. Reagan has anything for us.
I just want to make sure that it's on the next meeting, because if you remember through the whole budget season, we knew this was coming. This was not a surprise, and the superintendent stood in front of us and said, whatever cuts come, he will take. So I want to make sure he has to live up to what his word was in front of all those budget meetings, that's all. So I'm not really looking for, an answer tonight, but we need to have, it needs to be on the agenda, we need to have a discussion. That's all. So it's just more making sure it's there.
All right. And I will see to it that it's on the September agenda. Okay, any other comments on that item? Questions?
If I may, Tom, just
Yes, ma'am.
just as a one point of information on that, I believe it's October when the state issues a final calculation of where the NBR needs to be for the district, and that includes what the student enrollment is, and that helps set that final NBR number. So the school district itself, I don't believe, will have a firm answer of where the NBR needs to be until October. So taking that into consideration, the reduction in ECS, while that may still be a fixed figure, the 64 grand at this point, how much the school budget can actually be reduced by on the district level is probably yet to be set. So,
But
point of information.
But when you read the state statutes on it, any ECS funding that the town has cut can be cut by the Board of Education. So if you're fully cut 114,000 or whatever. So the Board of Education automatically can be cut 114,000. We weren't in violation the year before.
Correct.
So, and Matt, you may be able to tell me this if I'm right or wrong, but if we don't take the 64,000 from the budget number this year, we can't take that extra 64,000 the following year. It's just to cover our bases. So that's the other reason why we need to put it to them probably before they get their real number in October.
Or your ECS figure is what changes you can make to the funding level, whether be it a reduction to ECS that came out of Hartford or not, is year to year. You can't say we were cut one year and then move to the next fiscal year and try to reduce or move by that amount. You're correct.
Yeah, so if we don't ask for 64,000, then that means next year, when we know it's 228 already, we can only cut the 228, we can't go back and ask for the extra 64 after that. Which is why I said in the last meeting that we need to have all these budget discussions with the Board of Ed way ahead of time, because we know it's coming.
Yeah.
It's coming, you know, and I'm not looking to reduce all the funding, but that's why we have to have tighter town budgets and tighter Board of Education budgets, so we know what we're doing. And we can get all the proper funding in place for both sides.
Thank you, Matt, for that. All right, there's nothing else for that item. Moving on to item E, FOI requirements. What was that again, Scott? That specific-
So it's just, I got a question, I guess, on FOI requests so Kevin Cunningham sent me a couple of his requests. I had made copies for the last meeting, but in fairness to Ron and to Kathy, she was not here, neither was Ron, and I understand why Ron was missing. And actually, one of them has nothing to do, it was requested way back before you. So the question is the state mandates you have to answer within 4 days. You have to say you got it in 4 days. Why though, so I'll go back to again, the one that has nothing to do with you. Why is the one request for all the DEF contract information not been given when it was requested in January?
If you're speaking of the FOIA request that Mr. Cunningham
Yeah.
requested,
Yep.
he actually came in with Naomi Dow Smith. I had called him and said, this is how many pages, this is how much it will cost. And he said to me, I would rather just come in and look at it. Him and Naomi Smith came into my office and looked at the DEF services contract. So that was in response to his FOIA request.
That was not the only question on there, but again, I couldn't bring it with me because I had to rush home, rush right back out. I will let Kevin discuss that after. All my point is there's other ones too. So here's the thing. How come it's taking us so long to answer them? Anybody's request. And to me, honestly, why is the Board of Ed Board of Finance not know about them? My suggestion to anybody in the town who makes an FOI request should also include all the Board of Finance members when it includes finances.
I would agree that, make sure that everybody's CC'd,
Yep.
especially if they're directed at me, just to ensure that there's a response and make sure that it's complied with.
So my real question is, I guess, either Ron or Kathy can answer or both, but what would you consider the normal time that one of them should be answered? Just,
In terms of receipt,
so you get the receipt, I know it's in 4 days, everybody always replies on the receipt. After you do that, there is no state statute that says you have to answer in a certain amount of time, but what do you think is fair for citizens to expect an answer?
I think it depends on the level of the request. I think it's all circumstantial. I mean, sometimes there's, I think it has to go through the state in order to consider validation. I think there's, if there's a follow-up, once we say we've received the request, we can maybe possibly work out the logistics on how to provide that information. I don't see why there can't be a reasonable way to proceed, but I guess it all depends on the level of the request. And if we have to dig into the clerk's office for records from 2010, that's different from asking for minutes from a meeting a few months back.
No, I agree. That's why I'm just asking. I want to know what you guys are considering a reasonable amount of time. That's all.
Yeah, I'll work with anybody. Thinking time management as I'm talking about, I'm just trying to figure out my way through the day, making sure that the request is complied with. But we can, I guess let's take one circumstance that as it comes. Each request is different from the next, so we can look forward.
Yeah, that's all I was going to put on. Just wanted to
Yeah,
ask a question.
And I agree that, of course, with us, anything regarding finance with us all being included, I mean, that's also helpful because, I didn't know where some of these stood, and obviously it's been a long time. And many cases months.
That's the point.
And so with us being included, I mean, I think we can also do our due diligence or follow up.
Yeah.
So even if the citizen is, the citizen obviously might get busy and has, a lot of time has gone by, but one of us could certainly follow up. And where do we stand with this? And we could even reach out if need be to them.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is that just because a request was made and we responded, doesn't mean we're automatically going to go and provide the information. We want to know details about it. If we, if, certain individuals like the FOIA habitually, if we didn't, if we just stopped everything we're doing to answer every single FOIA request, we'd get nothing done.
Yeah, I'm not asking this stuff.
No,
I'm just thinking,
I'm talking-
let's just say like 4 weeks would be a reasonable amount of time in my estimation.
And I'm talking in extremes, and I think, essentially a standard FOIA request, 4 weeks, I mean, it sounds reasonable. If there's any reason why it should be beyond 4 weeks, there should be some type of correspondence. But I think it's beyond fair.
That's why I'm just trying to.
No, I'm trying not to overpromise
No, I know.
or underpromise anything, so
Yeah.
I just want to adhere to the FOIA requests that are submitted.
Right.
Any other questions, discussion? No? Okay. Moving on to citizen participation. Before I open the floor, I would like to recognize our state representative, Brian Lanou, who is here. Brian, if you could just introduce yourself, 'cause I don't know that everybody really necessarily knows you, and if you have any comment that you'd like to make.
Sure. Well, I'm glad